Well, good morning and good afternoon for wherever you're calling in from. I want to welcome you to the 23rd Insights Live panel discussion that Spacer has brought forward. Today, we're going to be discussing building a culture of experimentation. This is just going to be an unscripted and lively discussion between our panelists, and I will attempt to moderate this and bring you the best information and hopefully some insights that will help you, your company, and just provoke some thoughts. This is a completely unscripted format, so we'd invite any questions into the Q&A box and we'll try and answer them as we go. First, I'd like to lead off with an introduction of today's panelists. So starting at the top of my screen here, Birgit, if you could give us a little bit of insight into who you are, and we appreciate you being on the panel today.
Yes, thank you, Gordon. Yes, I'm glad to be here. I'm based in Hamburg, and here it's already afternoon. I'm a trend consultant. In fact, I worked at Trend Bureau, which is based in Hamburg, a society for social change. And I worked there 12 years. I was managing director in the end. And then I had a project on my desk about the future of work. And that was so fascinating that I take off on it into my independence and founded my own company. And now I do consultancy for example, Swisscom Immobilien, Lufthansa Group, Xing, and always the question, how will we work in the future? What will people still do in the future in the office? Knowledge worker, what is it? And how can also the environment be shaped so that they are more enhanced in their doings and that they can extend their performance? I think this is one of my key elements. I think the office has to change in this direction, and this is also where we have to try to experiment different ways, new images in aiming to this goal, achieving this goal.
Yeah, excellent. And love to have that experience coming from Europe brought to the panel today. So with that, we'll continue with our other European partner. James, tell us a little bit about you and what you do with Gensler.
Yeah, so I'm James Lawrence. I'm a design strategist and senior associate at Gensler, and also the practice area leader for product development for Europe as well. I have a background in product design, but then quickly moved into commercial office interiors, where I have completed like very large scale projects from technology companies to professional service companies and everything in between, and schools as well. And then about 7 years ago, I moved into design strategies, and I work with companies and clients to figure out what the next moves are for them and create kind of engage and design briefs. And that means I work a lot with leadership teams and employee groups to actually co-create what their future might be for them, and to really figure out why they need new types of spaces or why they're making a change, and to bring that forward and bridge that in terms of what the design concept is for them as well.
Fantastic, appreciate that. And Corinne?
Hi everyone, Corinne Murray. I work for RXR Realty in our innovation lab. I'm director of workplace strategy and workplace innovation, focusing mainly right now on building workplace and experience tools for and products for our portfolio, geared towards our, everyone from our enterprise tenants all the way down to our smaller and medium-sized businesses. Previously, I worked at WeWork, so went through a lot of big transformation along with the company. Started out doing workplace consulting for our big clients, but then really geared myself into building out our concept of activity-based working for a very, very fast-growing company, and figuring out how to then translate that into a product offering for our clients. Prior to that, I was at American Express. I ran the global workplace program there, and way back when I started my career, I was at CBRE doing brokerage, a little bit of market research. So I've definitely made the rounds throughout the industry, but continuous improvement, the culture of experimentation is really at the crux of what I've made the joke to people that I work with, that like, that's the hill I'm going to die on. It's at the crux of everything that we really need to be focusing on in order for this to really transform into an iterative and, you know, continuously learning environment for us. So I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, that's excellent. I appreciate that. And Nick, give us a introduction.
Thank you, Gordon. I'm Nick Stedman, VP Global Marketing, based from our office in London. Been in the workspace industry for 23 years now, seen massive change, nothing so much quite as what we're seeing right now. So very excited about the subject for today, and very interested in what our panelists can bring to the table here. Looking forward to it. Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, fantastic, Nick. Thank you. And just a point of reference, I'm Gordon Mcdonald, part of the Space Store workplace strategy team based here in our lovely New York Design Center. And I work with a lot of our key accounts on their workplace strategies, and the culture of experimentation really is something, as Corinne said, I'm passionate about as well. You know, and really this platform of COVID has given us such an, or I should say this pandemic of COVID has really given us the platform to do this experimentation with. So with that, let's get into this. And I'd like to start off with a leading question. And I'm gonna, Corinne, since you stuck it out there, I'm gonna push this one towards you. You know, if there was anything that you could change for a client and experiment with them on, you know, regardless of what the client, whoever they may be, whatever background they may be, you say, look, I just want to try it, you know, try an experiment on your space. What would that be? What does that look like here in 2021?
It is hard to pick just one, but I would say something we spoke about yesterday when we were preparing is the idea of an experience-based workplace. It's sort of the next iteration of what I think everyone here, and I'm sure many on the Zoom would agree, it's been around for a while, but it's been a very tried and true format for workplace. Let's figure out how we can layer experience and more sort of, you know, our understanding now of psychological safety into how we design. How do we design for, you know, for focus? Let's put, you know, visual, like eliminate visual distractions, eliminate auditory distractions, and just focus on the basics of human instinct and layer that on top of how we typically design. That's the thing that I think would uncover the greatest amount of insights for us to then build more and just create that flywheel of what can come next.
Yeah, that is very very intriguing, because I think there's so many different layers to an office, and really it's like that. You know, I know it's a term we often use, an onion, as you start to peel it back, but you know, what layers actually matter, what layers can go away, what layers do we need to improve upon. How are you seeing this, James? If there was something you could change, or you would love to try on a current client, what does that look like for you?
Well, we're trying and experimenting a lot of things right now with lots of different clients. And I just to build on what Corinne's saying, that idea of experience-based working or creating the office as a service and one of many spaces that people work from, that's probably what we're very much looking into. And the idea of experience means it's a very personalized one. So how do you create the office which caters for a workplace ecosystem? So it's one part of many different places where you can work from, and then saying, like, why are you coming to the office, and driving that purpose. So the things that I'm doing right now is experimenting with clients in terms of how do they figure that out for their populations, and then how do they put forward those opportunities for the people to actually say, yes, I definitely want this part, and I can kind of cherry pick the parts of the office that I want to have in their spaces. And I think then just the things that we always love doing is just piloting really great concepts, which maybe we can leverage from the retail hospitality spaces into the workspace to really kind of bridge that work life kind of blend that we're seeing as well.
That's so true. And you know, bringing in some of that hospitality, bringing in a place of where it's comfortable to come back to work and where we can thrive. You know, you see statements put out by large corporations, specifically, you know, JP Morgan Chase. They've been really much on the forefront of this. The CEO has been on the forefront of bringing, you know, their associates back to work. And just how do you build that into a culture? So, you know, as we're also experimenting coming back, it's kind of this living and breathing experiment that we're doing. Tell us a little bit what you would do, Birgit.
Yeah, I did a little bit such thing with my client Swisscom. We went to Aarhus in Denmark, and we visited a cultural center, and I told them, just go inside and think this is an office. And in this cultural center, you have a lot of students, it's a library, there are workshops, there are stages, performances. So this is sort of a curated and didactical guided stage for experimenting ourselves, themselves. And I think this is what the office in the future should be. And I'm always trying to find new images, because I still think we are in this industrial machine era, still stuck in these standards. And now we have to cope with artificial intelligence, and we have to reveal our natural learning and abilities of interact. And so I think a theater, a stage, a cultural center, this is great to watch and to adopt, because also as an employee you have to try out several roles. You have to play in a playful way to find solutions together, and also yeah, and you also try to find out what connects us. We are all here now in this moment, and what are the combinations or what is the magnet which brings us together and lets us work together?
Yeah. You have any thoughts around that, Nick?
No, that's very interesting. Actually, it'd be fascinating just to ask our audience now. We could launch a quick poll. How many of you out there are currently running some form of experimentation in your workplace right now? It's just simple yes and no answer.
Yeah, as we wait for the numbers to come in on that, it'll be interesting to see who is actually doing experimenting. And it was interesting, about a year ago when we first started hosting these webinars, one of our very first panelists said to us, you know, he said, he's from a large financial institution, and he said, this is the perfect platform to start experimenting. You know, when you only have 10, 20% of your staff in at the office, you can rearrange the furniture, you change the lighting, you can change the biophilia, and you know how many companies actually did take advantage of that positive impact as we went through COVID. You know, being able to change things up a little bit, and you know, are those going to be positive results as we return to the office? Are our associates and employees going to see that as positive? What do you think about that, James? You know, maybe senior management's been playing around with the workplace. How do you think that will be received when we come back?
I think it is the biggest period of experimentation, and the biggest kind of transition that everyone's experimenting with is firstly that culture of how things get done, and realizing that the office is not the only place to work from, firstly. And then the clients that I've been working with in terms of piloting small spaces and trying to create little microcosms of what they think the future of work might be as well, has been this perfect opportunity where we've taken some slack spaces on some floors and experimented with how do we maybe create digitally inclusive environments for team meetings and hybrid meetings. I think there's a lot of examples out there already. How people are, to borrow Bridget's term, creating that kind of magnet of the office, the magnet that brings people in for the right reasons and what they value, and the idea that you also dilute some of the spaces that you don't want to actually promote to try and get the right balance of what the office kind of is for in the future. The one thing I think a lot of clients that we're working with right now are definitely doing is doing a lot of engagement with people, and that's really key. The idea that just asking people, you know, base questions in terms of what their expectations are for the future and how they what type of environment is going to work best for them as well. A very large technology company I work with ran a very comprehensive survey, and we really hit upon an idea of what spaces and purposes people were coming for, and then the development of personas in terms of why people are coming back to work as well. So a bit of an organizational change for them in terms of trying to define, not by roles and functions, but by purpose and value in terms of what people are looking for in the future.
That was very interesting. Should we have a quick look at those results now?
Absolutely.
Okay, wow. 85% yes. So 85% of you experimenting with some form of change. That's very interesting. There's an excellent question here from Annika. How do you balance experimentation and the change that it brings with the change fatigue that many are feeling after this year? What's your thoughts on that, Corinne? Do you think that there's certain expectation that things need to change, or people just want to get back to normal?
I think I might be biased on this. Obviously, I am here, but it is a fine line of the majority of people, especially out of our circles, just, you know, the average person who is in sales or is in like business development, wherever in your organization, people are, whether they realize it or not, they want something to change. They might not want the big sweeping, like we're going to demo everything and you're not going to recognize it, but they at least need to see some incremental changes because they know that this past year has turned everything upside down. And so if there are ways to, and I think this is why many companies in this very moment are, to James's point, focusing a lot on engagement and gauging what people are feeling, because we need to support that before we can really start talking seriously about space transformation. But this is also where the culture of experimentation can work in our benefits as consultants, as operators, is you can sort of cherry pick as you go along rather than doing the one big blowout project. And so it's, I'm sure, really hugely beneficial from a change management perspective, because you get to plot things out and you get to tell people this is happening now, this is why it's happening, this is how you can stay alert and how you can get involved. And then it's just, you know, back to Gordon's analogy of the onion, like rather than you doing the peeling of the onion yourself, you're making it more realistic for people to participate in the onion peeling with you. So culturally, I actually do see some opportunity positively that while there can be some unrest with the amount of change that's happening, a lot of it can be quelled if you're doing enough really deeply engaging change management and just not kid gloving your employees. I think that's really what that part comes down to. And so the two forces are at work of like how empathetic are you able to demonstrate this change to your people, how empathetically, and then how can you break it into pieces? How can you sort of do one thing at a time and microtask rather than multitask?
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, I think the results from that survey show that so many are thinking about what is going to change. As we've said, that the pandemic has turned everything on its head. We can work from home. The experiment has largely worked, but there's something missing, isn't there? And people are expecting that experience when they come back to the workspace. They will only come back to the workspace for that experience. And so getting that right and understanding, I think, is key.
Yeah, and I think also the sort of gradual implementation, it allows you to learn as you go rather than just sort of holding your nose and hoping for the best, that you have as much information as you possibly can. So like in James's client's case, that's doing a comprehensive survey is really helpful, but what those employees know today is invariably going to be different than what they know a year from now. And so by stretching the timeline, you get to add that knowledge as you go.
Definitely. And actually they're finding that perfectly. That's a perfect example, Corinne. Whereas did a very wide global survey, and now we're doing like pilots and experimentations. We're rerunning engagement sentiment surveys and like measuring that change from the global one to the locals, and also designing out how we have touch points for actually measuring the experiments and pilots as well. One thing I could just add to that in terms of that idea of just doing something for the sake of it, or doing something which is meaningful. I think we all know that this period of working from home and this huge experiment does mean that things have changed, and there will be new expectations for the office of the future. And whether that's more service driven or more expectations on the balance of space being towards collaboration, meetings, community style space as well is the kind of unknown. It's striking that right balance for people that's very personal as well, to every client, to every person.
Yeah, there's still some very basic needs which needs to be catered for. You had some interesting comments yesterday, be again around the memory that we inherit from our ancients. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I wrote a study called The Human Factor at Work, and it is about what are our biological, sensory, and emotional needs, which have to be triggered or fulfilled to get more attention, to be prepared for learning, and for having a better performance at work in the end. Because I think the office still was made more for machines, perhaps even robots, in a process-orientated way, and now it should be more in a human-orientated way. And just connecting to the question before, I just wondered why we have now so much time in the home office, and we had the ups and downs, and we wanted to stay some days at home, yes, but I think the leaders should also encourage us to experiment at home different sorts of ways to behave. We are always sitting in front of the screen or on the desk, very classical, but it's not necessary. We could go in the kitchen having some Zoom conferences with a coffee, on the sofa, even in a more relaxing position. So I think also this is part of the digital transformation, to see in which condition I work best, and this is an experience I have to practice by my own, and I can start at home with that, and perhaps then I realize, oh, there are some things which work better in the office, and I'm happy one day to go back to it. But on the office, on the other hand, and that's your question, Nick, this evolutionary memory we have is, for example, that we want to have a covered back and a view in the front. And this is something you find in Feng Shui and all sort of things, but not in the open space, because there you have the workbenches and you don't know what's behind you, but our side is a little bit angled like this. So it gives a deep inside, there is a feeling trying to compete against this noise going there around, and this is bad for keeping concentration and also open space. I say it was just the flexibility for the real estate, but not for the user, because it didn't work for communication. Everybody put up the headphones, and for concentration, it didn't work neither. So I think there needs some more variation and not just flexibility in space.
Yeah, and that's interesting. Do you think that as we've come from a home working environment back to the office, we've got used to perhaps the luxury of being able to choose the space that we work in, and maybe having that protection, psychological or otherwise, where we work, and there's going to be a greater expectation when we come back to have that range of spaces to work in. There's a great question here around hybrid meetings, where we're going to have some of our team in the office and some out of the office. How do we get that equality, especially around the comment here about the 5 minutes before and afterwards? It's not just the meeting itself.
I think that's, oh, sorry, I'm sure you want to answer that.
Point on you because that was something you already yesterday mentioned.
Go, James.
Yeah, I mean, we are experimenting with those in terms of how it's formed in the work settings, and actually thinking about the value of when all teams are coming together and being in person, but also that a lot of our clients are looking at like kind of borderless teams and more global teams than ever before, because apart from time zone differences, it really means that people can collaborate truly and freely. And we see that out in the market with lots of policies about kind of their workplace of choice and choosing where to work. I think Spotify is a great example where they're saying, you know, you can work from anywhere, literally anywhere. And that comes down to policy. But in terms of workplace settings, we're definitely experimenting with, you know, yes, we can just use digital whiteboards and things, but what does that mean? Is that about the platform? So Miro or Mural or whichever you prefer. Is it also about how you capture the live or the analog whiteboard? Is it also about the amount of space you probably need to provide for around those types of screens, and then using technologies like smart capture of whiteboards or tables as well, and thinking about multi-camera setups for those spaces. But I would detest that the actual value of place and bringing people together like workshops is not going to be equalized, but we can try and make the experiences equitable as possible. And as seamless as possible as well. And that probably extends outside meeting spaces as well, into social areas and coffee spaces, and being able to, you know, take a coffee with someone from anywhere or whatever. And one of our clients has also been experimenting with how do you maybe delay that fear of FOMO for people, the fear of missing out of social events or occasions, and making sure they're either always broadcast, or there's a way to record them and recapture them, whether that's when you're back in the space or via different digital platforms.
Yeah, that is a really valid point. We had a question: how do you anticipate the future of the workplace and mobile work trends? Will it advance based on current broadband, 5G technologies, et cetera? And to that point, James, do you think that as we start to come back to the office, that those that come back, are they going to take the perks of the office? There are benefits to being in the office. You know, I know this was spoke about early on, but if you're sitting 10 feet away from your manager every day, you're looking dedicated, you're doing your work, as opposed to that person that's working from home. There's that almost that inequality of experience. Just from a visual point, how do you balance that out with technology? How do you balance those out so that there's not the fear of missing out versus actually the fear of focusing on the things that actually matter? So, you know, home, heads down space. Work, I come in, I collaborate, and we catch up on the projects we worked on. You know, how do you balance that out?
Well, there's a few things there, right? One is the idea of presenteeism and kind of being seen to be working. The other about that sense of learning and having opportunities because you're visually there or connected. And the other about the kind of fear of missing out is really about the kind of technical kind of technology platforms and how we can work more seamlessly together. It's probably a combination of all those things, really. But there's a few things in terms of policy changes, in terms of saying that do companies, there are some companies who are saying it's ultimately the choice of whoever. Some say it's the leaders. Others saying it's leaders by cascading down. In terms of going from group level to team level, or of terms of when people just should be in. One thing's for sure is I think that people will be coming back together for the things they really value, and the things that you really value are probably those moments where you want to be kind of in person and interacting, and very kind of objective meetings as well.
Yeah, do you see that, Corinne?
Yeah, well, I think definitely like design and tech play a part in this, but I think sitting on top of that and James made the point of policies, like, you know, there need to be really, really prescriptive norms about how these things get used, and really fight against this sort of our knee jerk as humans to think presenteeism equals productivity and equals greater amounts of success. So there's going to have to be a lot of really, really intentional policy and norm development that happens along with all this workplace transformation, both in the office, hybrid, working from home, because everyone works differently. Everyone's style is different. I present as a very loud extrovert sometimes, but I'm a little towards the middle of that spectrum. And so, me being away from the office shouldn't be a detractor from how my success is viewed. And especially, those who are even further on the introverted spectrum than I might be. So we need to figure out how, from like an inclusivity perspective, how do we make sure that those who don't necessarily thrive in those group settings or thrive, being as exposed as the workplace can sometimes make you, how do we make sure that does not become a detractor to what they're actually contributing to their organization and to their team's work? So I think, and this is the balance of, there does obviously need to be top-down messaging and policy development, but there also needs to be enough room for grassroots and natural people behavior to inform what those things are, rather than it just being shoved down. So finding that healthy and delicate balance, I think, is going to be the real challenge, but huge opportunity for all companies.
It's funny, I have the feeling, when we spoke about why women sometimes have difficulties in getting in the higher positions, it's often said because they are not in these networking evenings. They go home to their children and they don't get attached to this, what is happening after work or whatever. And I think it's a little bit true. And now we have this fear of missing out. It's like what women have everybody now during the day, because we are perhaps not there at the office. But in fact, what we learned is, hey, be there, and being there is an advantage. And I think also for the office, it should be an advantage that being there is an advantage. So I don't see a problem that you are in a perhaps less preferable situation when you are not there and you are not physically attached, because then you don't realize that this is perhaps necessary for getting a step further and for realizing that there is a difference between just communicating by a screen or doing the effort and going there and doing something together, because it works differently and the result is differently, and it's just up to you if you are doing this effort. And I think this can be easily visible, and I'm against this. Everybody has to be the same, and everybody is individual, and everybody can do his individual things, and it will work anyway. No, it won't. It won't work.
Are you saying then, Big, that a career can only be built in the workspace?
Yes.
I think it's an advantage, and we should just be aware of it, because we want to get in touch with people. We are social human beings, and this is always in favor. On the other hand, I'm sure that technology is doing such amazing things. It would be much better. And as we are all in these social collaboration networks, you get in touch what is going on. All the necessary things are there. They are visible for everybody. It's even visible who had the idea and who was commenting what. So there's much more of the chat which was hidden before, now exposed. So I don't think that the problem is so big as we do it with this fear of missing out.
Yeah, so what we actually, just as you're speaking, what's coming to mind is this has really given managers probably one of the best platforms to communicate in various ways with their employees. I mean, how many, prior to this, how many times have we tried to, communicate to our employees through various methods, whether it's a memo, whether it's social media, but actually now you can actually engage in so many meaningful ways. And I think, James, that comment you made earlier about, are we going to live stream workplace events so those at home can have that same experience as those in the office? We may not have a virtual Christmas party or an in-person Christmas party, but what is that that keeps us engaged and keeps the brand and the culture of a company? What do you think about some HR experiments? I know none of us here are probably background in HR, but it certainly plays into the workplace, doesn't it?
Definitely. I think it's one of the key factors in terms of policies and HR things. We've definitely seen a lot of people look at that, the right policies of saying when to place value on coming in. I've seen one HR policy, for example, which says that onboarding is really key, and being present for onboarding is really key. And then for the first 6 months, I actually recommend the majority of time is spent in the office, so you really get that sense of belonging. And that sense of belonging is actually where, when we talk about experience and community, is really crucial. The fact that people's talent kind of choices will be made on the whole offer, not just on, you know, the great space and the amenities that people have, which might have been the fad about 5 to 10 years ago, but also the whole offer in terms of what other services are provided for people. And I think we've all seen different clients provide different working from home setups and benefits, and then we're also seeing how do they also extend amenities or perks to the home environment as well. So whether that's compensation for bills, the wellness apps, different ways on employee benefit programs such as counselling as well. I think that's the other huge factor in the experimentation that we had. I think, Corinne, you used the word empathetic before, and I really think that's where HR is coming into it, is how do we create that kind of culture of empathy in organizations to say, actually, some of this experience is quite tough, and the services that are really crucial and beneficial to people may be those types of things as well in the future.
Shift away from cultural confetti.
Exactly.
You know, snacks and balloons and parties are fun,
Mm-hmm.
but there are much more foundational stuff like what you just said that are much more transformational and matter much more on a deeper personal level to people that probably need servicing first. It's sort of like a group Maslow's hierarchy of like, we've got to take care of our actual well-being before we can start thinking about parties and think about community and things like that.
Very valid point. I like that. We have a question that came in early on, the difference between experimentation and piloting and just trying to do something new. Do you want to take that one, Corinne? Do you see that? And just as an experience, just as a point of reference, I'm working with a client that they're doing a pilot space for the return to the office. You know, they're looking at bringing back 300 employees here in New York City, starting in July, which is going to be, you know, a pretty big uphill battle. That's about 25% of the employees, and they're calling it their pilot space. You know, they're going to try this out, see how this goes, and we'll adjust as we go. Other times you get that element of just experimenting. But what are you seeing, and what are the conversations you're having around that?
Sure. Well, first, I think it's a really, really important nuance to split. And I think where the industry sometimes struggles is we pilot a whole comprehensive thing, like to your point, like piloting a space. What then gets challenging on the research and understanding standpoint is you don't know which of those levers is the thing that's working or the thing that's not. So experimenting, I think you can get a little more surgical of like, we're going to change this one process. We're going to give enough time to actually analyze and see how it works. And, you know, it's much slower and, you know, it takes much more time, but that I think enables more precision around change and transformation, and piloting can be successful. I don't mean to say that. There is a lot more data that needs to be captured and a lot of different streams that can get confused and conflated, because when you're piloting a new space, you're piloting new norms, you're piloting new space types, new arrangements. To Birgit's point, if you've got your back to things that you might not have previously, how are you physiologically responding to that? So there's just a lot more, there are several more plates in the air when you pilot, whereas experiment, it can be one thing. And, you know, for me, having conversations right now, we are focused more on piloting because we have to introduce a fully scoped out product for our tenants to come back to. So I'm in a little bit of a stymie, but, you know, given the opportunity, I value experimentation more, but that requires a much longer lead time and a lot of, you know, patient buy-in. So
a lot more data behind it.
Yeah.
Do you think though, Corinne, just to add to that, do you think sometimes experimentation is more of like an organic process as well, in terms of being free to create and experiment and test that way?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, like, you know, not doing, if let's say if you and your team were to go in and do observational studies, that would then, you know, figure out what you might want to experiment with.
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's just a known gap or a known thing that's broken, say, you know, doing the workshopping and figuring out, like, let's just try this route, or let's try this system or this process. So yeah. I don't think that it's the beauty of experimentation is it can be anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what I mean.
Yeah, fully agree.
I would also say it's experimentation what is needed, because it's also open to rituals or to methods or ways to experience the new. When you do a pilot, you have already something in mind, and it's very perhaps you have experimented before and then you have a design and this is piloted. But experimenting, as you said in the question, I think Mark, is something, always trying something new and looking what's out. And it's not even necessarily that you have one goal. Perhaps you only have a direction and then you find your questions during this process and your aims and your
That's a great point, because piloting is sort of moving from certainty to certainty, whereas experimentation is like, we don't know where we're going to find.
but also it's that idea that you add on to it, and it's that like game of consequences, and then it might form the concept.
And it's really perfect because it is the same like this iterative agile work style. So it goes along with, and it's something we also should do when we try to imagine the new office.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think one thing that is so great about experimenting is that there's not really a wrong, because the desired outcome is, you know, piloting, you kind of know where you're going. You kind of know what the end result is that you want. Whereas experimenting, you have an idea, but we want to see what happens. What's the final finish? We don't have the answer to it. And I think that really in workspace, being able to have that agility is so important. And I think, you know, as we're talking to clients, nobody wants to get caught out again without that agility and flexibility to experiment. If whatever the next, Corinne, I hope you're not prophetic. We were talking yesterday and you said maybe in 5 years there's another crisis of sorts. But with that being said, we don't want to be caught out again. So how do we help companies create that sense of flexibility that, you know, we don't have a crystal ball, but we've done enough and we're pairing together these experiments to say, you know, as we try these, this is becoming the new way of working. I'll leave that to you, Corinne, to answer.
Yeah, I said this yesterday when we were sort of prepping, but I think the spirit of experimentation is easy for us to buy into. I think everyone is curious. Everyone wants to know what's coming next. So, but we need to start thinking about what are the mechanics to actually make it feasible. And so, you know, what I talked about a bit yesterday was we have to follow the money, where the money is being spent, how it's being spent, how it's structured in organizations. What I am about to say is literally the length of what I actually know about it. So it's quite minute, but, you know, the way that commercial furniture, the way that just like FF&E in general is purchased right now is with the expectation that it will amortize over 7 to 10 years. We don't have 7 to 10 years to burn and figure out what's coming next. We need to we need to, and that's, that is finance, that is supply, that is procurement, that is providers, that is consultants. We need to not only do we need to figure out what we want to build, we need to figure out how do we bake in opportunities for change, and making spaces permissible for people to hack on their own, and figure out what is the line in the sand of like the company saying we cannot put our people at risk in this capacity in our space. Like, figure out what is the absolute line to say these are the things they can tinker with, these are the things that we need to hire a moves ads change thing, or these are the things that are just not changing until we demo space. So really coming up with those categories, identifying and sharing with people, like, this is fully in your remit, like, go nuts, you can change it, and and we'll work with you. And then on the more financial side, figuring out what are the materials that are either modular, very easily recyclable or transformed, and really figuring out how to make those work. And then on the provider side, figuring out how do those products fit in that category without being at such an outsized cost to what's generally done right now. Because I think, and James, you probably can speak to this more than I can, but really sustainable products are still marked at an index to the regular commercial stuff. Furniture as a service is still significantly more expensive than if you were to just buy it outright and let it amortize over 7 to 10 years. So when those things become a little bit more equal, I think that's when this experimentation and this continuous improvement, the conditions are actually set for it to be successful.
There's a comment here from Christopher, which is interesting, that experimentation allows accidents to happen. Mm-hmm. Serendipitous happenings. Yes. So
definitely, but I also think it allows for like a kind of a BYOD approach to design, like bring your own design and really kind of co-create. I think it's about setting up the right infrastructure for that to happen, all the great things that Corinne was saying, and the idea about finding the balance between curated space and created space. Mm-hmm. If it's too curated, nothing will change, nothing will adapt, because people will be afraid about moving that, I don't know, chair from there to there or whatever. Or if it's too created and there's no rules, it's just complete chaos. And so you have to, as Corinne is saying, have the right kind of fixed spaces to actually allow for that kind of flexibility. And definitely the idea of like kind of hacking spaces is definitely something that's being piloted right now, because people don't know what size teams are coming to what size areas. And so they're working on, our clients or some of our concepts are working on how do you convert sizes of spaces or adapt sizes of spaces for different size teams, but in a very sensible way.
Annika brought that very question. There's an element of letting employees experiment for themselves. I bet most companies are brilliant problem solvers. And so how can we give them the right tools to find their own solutions? And that really comes to making spaces hackable, for the employees, allowing them that flexibility to hack their own space and say, you know what, I need to work a little bit different. I can move this here. Do you see that, Birgit? How would you implement something like that?
Yeah, but I also think that there's still a little bit more to give and to provide than only having modular furniture and let them hack whatever they want to do with it. So I would say it's perhaps more about creating an atmosphere for a specific work types. That's what Corinne yesterday said. We had activity-based working, but it was more from the real estate point of view and not from the user point of view. And now when users come back to the office and know where they can concentrate better or where they can be more creative together, perhaps, then they want to do this. And then they need not only a wall or whatever, or some furniture, but to enhance this in an even better way, it would be an atmosphere or several atmospheres in this activity-based intention. And that is something which should be built and provided, I think, also in sort of an invitation to see, look here, this is a professional workspace, and that's why we have this for you. And it's not such moduled thing like you have at home. This is really conceived and thought through, and now, but it's still open for you to experiment and tell us, give us feedback, and let's have a look. And what I think is interesting also is that on one hand, the furniture industry is renting furniture and has perhaps also even then this more holistic approach. On the other hand, we have infrastructure who is able to have this human-centric lighting, so that you have the real daylight brought into the space, which is also good for our biological watch and clock and everything. So you have this biological, physiological aspects and the variation of atmosphere. And this is much more than the well-being we had in the office, which was just decoration or flexibility. Now it is an atmosphere, and it is a situation which drags you into and lets you be quicker in your performance and in your mood of work than you would be without it, when you have to arrange everything by yourself.
Yeah, so there's, sorry, go on.
Circling it back to the question, I think, from Chris that Nick mentioned of just experimentation is how you find accidents. Like, a lot of company culture has been around, again, like the certainty to certainty. Taking on and this goes from leadership all the way down to people managers, this is what we've thought makes sense, but show us how we might be different, how we might have missed something, show us how we might be wrong, and being okay with only knowing what you know and being open to, I didn't think about that, or I am a 5'11" white lady and I didn't think about how what is created might affect someone who is not an able-bodied individual or someone who is not a white woman. It opens up opportunities for inclusive design to make its way into how things improve. And I think it's something that we struggle with in workplaces, having that spirit of and sort of structure of experimentation allows you to fix much more quickly. And that circularity allows for people to see, even if they might not have it right in that moment, they are willing to say, our bad, we're gonna fix it, and here's how.
I mean, that's a great point, and the idea that people are just more aware generally as well. And I can just bridge both yours and Bria's comments there around, definitely people have more awareness of the inclusivity, all having kind of felt some kind of form of loss as well, and being maybe at disadvantage sometimes. And then definitely people are much more aware of the other factors as well, such as sustainability, etc. It's much more top of mind for a lot of people. And we're definitely seeing clients also experiment with, how do you showcase those things in the workspace to be like kind of, because you cannot manage what you do not measure, and people want to see it. And there's lots of clients that are also looking at how to communicate and broadcast that stuff to the employees, because it's more top of mind and much more of a kind of selling point. So if it's an AR environment where you can actually see the sustainability outputs of the space, or the provenance of where the timber from the table is from, it actually does matter as well.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. As we're in the last 5 minutes of this webinar, I do want to thank everybody for their questions that they've submitted. Just any closing thoughts? Virgil, we'll start with you if you have any closing thoughts to wrap us up.
Yeah, I would say try to find different images which don't come from the office. I think the stage is great, because it is about giving us, the employees, more self-effectiveness, so that they can really perform, and they need light and surrounding, and they play different roles, and they have to find spaces to do that. And I think the office is this kind of place. Also, the physical learning, when you get together and have all your senses alert, is interesting. And also the organization of work, That means when you start a project, it's probably recommendable to meet physically, perhaps in a lounge, in a restaurant or whatever, to get acquaintance with each other. And then when you work, you can also so make up your mind when you go digital and when you go physical, because it is a difference, and it's good that it is a difference. There are advantages in both sides, and we have to work on this, and we have to experiment this on ourselves. How does it affect our performance and work and the condition of the whole team? And I think this is the culture of experimentation, which we have to do in media, in space, in realities. And yeah, in the end, it's social, territory, and emotional, because we are human beings.
Yeah, that's excellent. I really appreciate you being on. And any further comments, Corinne?
Other than I need to be reading a lot more Birgate's stuff, advice for those of you that are in the middle of projects and starting to scope out your projects: fight for as much wiggle room as you possibly can, because if you ever needed it before, you're going to need it 10 times more in the years to come, because we are at the beginning of a new phase. People like us can project what we think might be because of the basics and the foundational knowledge that we have, but we are also still guessing. So the more budget that you can protect for future changes, the more wiggle room that you can create for others and your employees to provide ongoing contribution, not just one-time contributions. I think those are some basics that you might be able to carve out relatively easily in as you get started right now.
Yeah, that's great, because everybody has that challenge. I mean, we've seen the amount of real estate that is available in New York now, and now is the better time than ever to negotiate the things that are non-negotiable before. So, James, how about you? We appreciate you being on, and any further thoughts?
I think don't get mired in terms of this experimentation of just reactions to COVID. Think long term and think past just like social distancing and safe return, but actually what the future expectation shifts are and how we want to embrace those, and not actually lose some of the good stuff from this period of work. And that idea of experimentation should be an adaptation and a little more organic, and it's about how we set the scene for that in our spaces and bridge that gap to create kind of better workplace cultures.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, looking beyond, a lot of what we've learned is going to stay with us, but it may not be applicable to, we may all of a sudden find through this experimentation, whatever the next challenge it is, we've gained knowledge from it. And so that's fantastic. And Nick, any further wrap up thoughts?
No, anything more to add. I really want to just echo your thanks to our panelists here for some very rich, informative content from many years of experience combined. It's been excellent, and a big thank you to all those attending. We really do appreciate it. Hopefully we've learned something valuable today. Just also flag that there is a link in the chat for the next webinar, so be sure to log in and book that. But otherwise, I think, Gordon, we could say thank you very much, and a good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.